Holy Gospel is written in the 7th chapter of St. Luke, beginning at the 36th verse. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house and took his place at the table. And a woman in the city who was a sinner, having learned that he was eating in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster jar of ointment. She stood behind him at his feet, weeping, and began to bathe his feet with her tears and dry them with her hair. Then she continued kissing his feet and anointing them with the ointment. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw it, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would have known who this is and what kind of woman this is who is touching him, and that she is a sinner." Jesus spoke up and said to him, "Simon, I have something to say to you." "Teacher," he replied, "speak." A certain creditor had 2 debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he canceled the debts of both of them. Now, which of them would love him more? Simon answered, "Well, I suppose the one for whom he canceled the greater debt." And Jesus said to him, "You've judged rightly." Then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she's bathed my feet with her tears and dried them with her hair. You gave me no kiss. From the time I came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which were many, have been forgiven. Hence she has shown great love. But the one to whom little is given loves little." Then he said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." But those who were at the table with him began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" And he said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Soon after, he went on through the cities and villages, proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom to God. The 12 were with him, as well as some of the women who had been cured of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons were gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward Chuza, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their resources. Here ends the gospel for the day. Please be seated. Sometimes when you come across a text, you look at the text and it seems so insignificant, so unimportant, and you kind of wonder yourself why it is even there, and why especially it became a gospel lesson for a particular Sunday of the year. As I was thinking about this, and I was also thinking about something my mother once said when we saw people who were not a part of the church at one time, or who came to the church anew, who were converted from another faith. They usually became the most active people in the church. And my mother used to say one of the problems that we have with regular members is they become complacent and just kind of go along with the flow. And sometimes it takes people from the outside to come in and really show them some enthusiasm, particularly those new people converted to the faith, because it becomes something very significant in their life. And we who have been Christians from our birth sometimes take things for granted and make them look actually dull. Well, we have a story today that I think you're familiar with. It's been read, I'm sure, many times during your lifetime in the church. It's about a Pharisee inviting Jesus to come to lunch. That was a very ordinary thing to do, to invite a rabbi who was traveling by to come in and visit. It was kind of a thing of honor to do that to a traveling rabbi, but it was also important for them to come to your house if they were gaining a certain amount of following, because it showed that you were a loyal person of the church. It was proper protocol, let's call it. Well, when a person came to eat, one of the things they usually did when they sat down, they talked for a while, They sat on the floor, kind of stretched out, rested on one elbow, or fed along the way. But if other people knew that somebody was coming to that house that probably was a rabbi, someone who was a philosopher, they were allowed to come in and bring and sit on the outside of the room and listen to the person and hear what they had to say. So this was all a very normal, everyday kind of event. And then it becomes something significant in the interaction that happens with the people. Because what happens is the Pharisee is feeling that he's going along and doing all the right things, and instead of really becoming involved in Jesus' words, he goes off on his own tangents. The first thing he goes off on is he really scolds this woman for being out of place. First of all, a woman was not allowed to take down her hair. That was kind of protocol. Actually, husbands could divorce their wives for taking down their hair in public. You think you have it rough now? It was a lot worse. But it was a kind of a flamboyant display of affection, which really was embarrassing. You can imagine some visitor coming to your house and you invite another person in and they pay special attention to him and actually show a very open affection. It became a little embarrassing for the Pharisee. When Jesus kind of scolds him, it kind of glides right over his head, as we'll talk about in one of the points of the sermon. But then he gets off on Jesus forgiving the person's sins. Jesus said, well, I know that she's a sinner, but she's displayed ample love, and she's done the right things, and she wants to hear the word. And so her sins are forgiven. There are 3 points, I think, that we need to get out of this. The first one is that there are some basic symbols of respect that are a part of the whole worship experience. As we said in this children's service, there were 3 things that they were supposed to do. If somebody of the rank of rabbi came into the house, one was to wash their feet because their feet became dirty. It was also something for hygiene within the house. It was to give him a kiss, and then as a symbol of respect, to anoint them. That was a symbol of honor. The interesting thing is that the Pharisee, in trying to make judgment on other people following proper protocol, he forgot all of those things. He really didn't show any respect. There are things that we do as normal activities, which we just generally accept are things that we do to show people proper respect and honor that are important. And there are certain basic things we do as Christians, one of which is go to church, one of which is to pray, one is to look carefully at the needs of other people, but that's only the beginning. But it is a part of the whole process of believing, and these things are individually important. And I know when we have the service, the basic service is the same as the service we had last week as far as the liturgy is concerned. We do basically the same things. And some people say, well, that's kind of meaningless. Well, no, it isn't. Because there are proper things that we do in relationships that are very important. And we go to these stores that have these little signs that say, when you come into this house, this is what you can expect. This is what we do as people if we welcome someone in. There are certain things we do as church people. If people come in, we are supposed to show them proper respect and proper acknowledgement. Just basic things. And Jesus said to the Pharisee, Simon, you aren't even demonstrating the basic things. This person here, who you call a sinner and who is insignificant in your sight, is doing the things maybe a little different. The protocol is a little different, but she's doing them in earnest. and she's doing them with feeling, and she does them because she cares. And so don't ridicule these proper protocol that we have. One of the things I do when I see some of our young people getting together and dating, I always say, one of the things I say to the girl is, does he open the doors for you? And this is what we did as kids. Now, I guess that's lost someplace. And I said, next time you go to, you stand at the door, and when he asks you what you're doing, say, well, aren't you going to open the door for me? And you see what kind of respect you get, what kind of response, because that'll start to tell you what kind of a person you're dealing with. And of course, if you get hit, or you slapped, or you cursed at, maybe it's time just to have the cowboy ride away. See, proper little instances of protocol are important in our life, in our church. Second thing, the Pharisee always tended to look and straighten out the lives of other people. The lady wanted to straighten her own life out. And that makes a whole bunch of difference. If we are always focused on what somebody else does and things are wrong because of somebody else, and we don't take the proper responsibility, we can't change it. But if we understand something is amiss, and we come and we look for a solution for that, then things begin to change. I've used this illustration hundreds of times and a number of times in this church. It's because it was so important. And when Al Rognus was elected to a seminary when I was a student, in his acceptance speech, he said one of the things his mother worried about always, he says, Al, when you get to high offices in the church, don't get proud. Because when you think you deserve that position, and it's not just a position of honor, and you think because of your position you can begin to direct other people's lives for them, maybe you're going down the wrong road. Pharisee didn't have any kind of introspection on his own life at all, even though it was totally out of whack. And Jesus told him in so many words, your life is out of whack. He just let it pass because he's too interested in straightening out the woman. Tiger Woods. Great example of somebody recently who started to believe he was kind of invincible. The fellow that had gotten him to the top of the golfing world, his instructor, he said, I want to change. I want to become even better. And he said, I don't think you're right for me anymore. I'm going to change. And he fired the guy that had taken him to the top. Well, Tiger developed some other problems too. But his game fell apart. Because he started to believe he was invincible and could only be something to somebody else in terms of an example. And he forgot his own game, and it failed him. That's what happens to us if we're always looking at other people and trying to cure everybody else. Luther said it was so important to look inwardly and spend the time there, because when the inside changes, the outside takes care of itself. And that's what Jesus was saying to the Pharisee. This woman's insides are right, and she's doing the right thing. Third thing that I think was important in this, sinful woman was open to change. She was willing to change. The Pharisee had come to a point where he said, no change necessary anymore. One person was asked a couple of weeks ago, don't you ever say you're sorry? And he said, oh yes, I say I'm sorry, but I have to be wrong first. Haven't come to that point. That's where the Pharisee was. Not open to change. Jesus said, you haven't even done the basic things. How can you say you're perfect when you haven't even begun? Some of the great changes in my life came as places I didn't want to go, or people I didn't want to see. And changed forever, because I guess I was open at one time. Greatest preacher that I ever heard was Shorty Yortland, Central Lutheran in Minneapolis. He was an orator. He was just an absolute orator, and could just spellbind. And it was devastating. When we went to Minneapolis, my dad would take me to Central Lutheran, and I'd sit and listen there. Probably one of the most inspirational things about getting ready to be a part of the ministry. And then he took a position in Oak Park, Illinois, and he was followed by a fellow by the name of A. Reuben Granitska. I was devastated by it, because I listened to those services on Sunday morning after I came home from church. They were on the radio. I listened to them. I just spellbound by them. And so we went to a youth convention, and Granitska was speaking there. I didn't even go. I didn't go to his service. And my minister said, "Why didn't you go to the service?" And I said, "Because I don't think he's anything compared to Shorty Yortland." He said, "Oh my, aren't you an arrow one?" He said, I really think you need to go and hear him once." So I did. I did because I had to. Because it was baccalaureate service. And we had to go as part of our high school graduation. The speaker was A. Reuben Granitska. He happened to be a classmate of our superintendent of schools. And I was determined I was going to sit there and get nothing out of it. And his sermon I have repeated probably at least 50 times in my life. I remember every word of it. It made two of my friends a part of the ministry who came to visit that night. And he presented a style that was much different, but probably a lot more friendly, a lot more open, a lot more human. Changed speaking. You can judge whether that made any difference or not. Then I was at the seminary, and I was told that the speaker for that particular day at chapel was Sam Shoemaker. Well, he was Episcopalian. I didn't need to go and hear an Episcopalian. They were wrong anyway. Well, see, I was even more obnoxious before when I was a kid than I am now. You wouldn't want to have known me when I was 20. Anyway, one of my classmates said, you've got to come. He's the founder of Young Life. He's very, very significant in religious circles. And I went and heard a presentation that I just thought was outstanding. And he set up a whole different kind of frame for work, for a ministry. And one of the things I remember that he said so clearly is he said, you guys going out in the ministry, you're all going out for different reasons. But he said, never forget the people. Never forget the people. But he said, how many, and this is the question I want to ask you, and he asked the seminarians there who are seniors going to graduate. He said, how many of you today have one relationship outside your relatives or close friends, one person who you are being some kind of a guidance for? They are coming to you for some kind of help. You are counseling them. You are supporting them in their life. You know they are under stress, and you are there when they need you. How many of you have that kind of relationship? I think there were only 2 hands that went up in the whole class of 135. And he said, if the books are going to keep you from it now, the activities of the ministry are going to keep you from it. Never forget people. And your ministry is always about individuals. Made a dramatic difference in my life. I signed up for clinical training in the third year of my seminary. I wanted to go to a mental institution because I was doing counseling. I was kind of in a counseling major. They assigned me to Stillwater State Prison. I didn't want to go. And when I went there and visited, I wanted to go even less. I went back to the director of the program and said, I think you need to change my assignment. And he looked at me and he said, no, I think you need to change your attitude. He said, you need the state prison right now. It was a dramatic change in my life in terms of judgment of people. And when people say, you are so accepting now, is probably because I spent my training in a maximum security prison, a place I didn't want to go. Very, very pharisaical, wanting not to change. But sometimes it's very important that you're open to change. And so when you come to church, be open to change. When you are asked to serve in some kind of committee and you don't want to do it, be open to change. When you're asked by somebody to be a part of their life, be open to change. God deserves people who are open to change. The woman was, the Pharisee wasn't. The woman got a blessing. The Pharisee didn't. Insignificant story? I guess not. Because there were three important differences. The woman was very, very good at following a very, very important, simple parts of life. The Pharisee tended to judge himself by other people. The woman was just concerned about changing her life for the better. The Pharisee was not open to change. The woman was totally open to change. That's the lesson. It's not an insignificant story, I guess. I guess it's really profound. Amen.